Welcome back, everyone. We're again here broadcasting from my apartment, and we're continuing this coverage 5 days a week on this new coronavirus, the CCP virus. And today we have some interesting stories. We're going to start off with an anomaly that has taken place in China that people are interpreting as an omen. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is holding its main annual conference, and right before the conference started, the sky turned pitch black. We're also going to be going into some of the rising conflicts between the United States and China currently. And we're also going to give a global view of the state of lockdowns in different countries and what exactly is going on in different places. Now, that said, folks, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, really need your support with this channel. And also, if you've already subscribed, please double check and make sure you are still subscribed, because we've been told by some people that they seem to be unsubscribed without their knowledge. First off, the sky turns pitch black in Beijing as the CCP starts its biggest annual political conference on Thursday. There were thunderstorms started, and at 3 p.m., people said it looked like 3 a.m. It looked like pitch black nighttime during the middle of the day. Now, this is being seen by many, actually, even on the Chinese internet and even on Twitter. You can see many people talking about it. It's being seen as a bad omen for the Chinese Communist Party. So have a look at some of these videos now. You can see the sky looking like it's nighttime, and people even showing their watches, showing their own accounts, stating that this is not in fact nighttime. This is during the day. This is midday around 3 p.m. There was also some videos of the thunderstorms, which appear to be very aggressive. Take it for what you will, of course. Chinese traditional culture, this would be seen as an omen, a bad omen, meaning some big change is going to take place. Not all people believe it. The Chinese Communist Party notably is an atheist regime. They don't believe these types of things. Again, this is the largest annual conference of the Chinese Communist Party. All the main leaders of the Chinese Communist Party are going to be here. When Xi Jinping first entered, he and the other top leaders with him were not wearing masks, although individuals sitting down in the main amphitheater appeared to be wearing masks. Now, among the points that we know is going to be discussed at this meeting is the Hong Kong issue, as the Chinese Communist Party would describe it. They're talking about bringing the Chinese regime's national security law into China, and the United States has signaled it will stand by Hong Kong independence if the CCP chooses to do so. So U.S. senators unveiled a bill to sanction Chinese officials who violate Hong Kong autonomy. On May 21st evening, the Chinese regime's figurehead legislature, the National People's Congress, announced that it would propose a national security law for, quote, establishing a legal system and enforcement mechanism to defend national security in the former British colony of Hong Kong. It continues that 2 U.S. senators are planning to introduce a bipartisan bill that would sanction Chinese officials for undercutting Hong Kong's autonomy, hours after Beijing moved to impose a sweeping national security law on the territory. Now, with this said, at this time, the Chinese regime has the perfect conditions, at least strategically as they would see it, to overtake Hong Kong, to do what they want in Hong Kong, because the main thing that was preventing them during the height of the Hong Kong protests from going in and, say, mass arresting people or taking other extreme measures was that doing so would ruin the Chinese regime's international image. As things currently stand, the Chinese regime has the smoke screen of the pandemic. And so, in other words, they can go in now and arrest people if they choose to go out and protest under the excuse that they're arresting them for violating social gathering laws. In other words, violating laws that most countries in the world right now are enforcing to an extent. And the U.S. government is planning to stand by Hong Kong and sanction.
I don't know what it is because nobody knows yet. If it happens, we'll address that issue very strongly.
The Chinese leaders who are responsible for that, if they do in fact choose to do that. And moving on, this brings us to some of the growing conflicts that we're seeing now between China and the United States. First off, the United States has opened the sale of torpedoes to Taiwan, and the Chinese Communist Party has responded with ridicule. Now, the U.S. approved the sale of heavy torpedoes that can allegedly sink an aircraft carrier. Global Times, one of the Chinese Communist Party's main state-run media, responded with an article allegedly compiling messages from Taiwanese netizens. They said things such as, Taiwan money is really good. basically suggesting that this is just about the U.S. trying to make money off Taiwan. Others said it's expensive, but isn't it second-hand goods, suggesting that buying these goods from the U.S. is somehow second-hand and somehow suggests lower quality, and comments like this. Now, Taiwan has exposed previously that many Twitter accounts, many online accounts claiming to be from Taiwan are in fact being operated by the Chinese Communist Party.
We tracked down this account, and the result is this account comes from mainland China.
Chang said in a briefing Friday that many of these posts use the exact same wording. He said in just the past few days, at least 40 accounts have published hundreds of posts.
They offer templates and call on netizens to spread them. This account said, "Everyone, please try to make it real."
You may remember when Taiwan had this big spat with Dr. Tedros, head of the WHO. Tedros accused Taiwan of going after him because they were racist.
Please don't politicize this virus.
The WHO Director General is not happy with Taiwan. He recently accused the self-ruling island of attacking him in a racist campaign.
3 months ago, this attack came from Taiwan.
He did not give any evidence to back up his claims. The Taiwanese government says the accusation is groundless.
And so Taiwan responded to that, saying that they are the ones being discriminated against because it is Tedros himself who, at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party and its one China policy, is not allowing Taiwan access to the WHO. During that whole time, there were many Chinese Twitter accounts, many claiming to be from Taiwan, that came out in defense of Tedros, and Taiwan exposed many of those at that time as being controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Not clear whether these accounts are part of that, but it does align with the pattern that we've seen. And now, in the context of what's happening in Hong Kong and in the context of what is happening with Taiwan, both of which the U.S. said it will stand by, the Straits Times is reporting that the U.S. has massed planes at a Japanese base to show foes and allies it can handle the coronavirus. U.S. Air Force transport aircraft on Thursday, May 21st, massed at Washington's key Asian military air transportation hub, Yokoto Air Base in Japan, to show the potential foes and allies it was ready for action despite the coronavirus emergency. U.S. forces are stationed in Japan to defend the country from attacks from North Korea, but also to check China's growing influence in the wider region. And so from the standpoint of the Chinese Communist Party, this would be interpreted as a show of force given the current tensions around Taiwan, around Hong Kong, and around the threats coming from the Chinese Communist Party right now. In addition to this, the U.S. Senate has passed a bill that could delist Chinese companies from U.S. stock exchanges. This is from MarketWatch. It says, quote, "The Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act would force Chinese companies to adhere to U.S. securities law. The bill would require Chinese companies to establish they are not owned or controlled by a foreign government." Now, notably here, this isn't just about companies owned by the Chinese Communist Party, but also companies controlled by the Chinese state. And pretty much when you get to the mid to high level businesses, there's almost no such thing as a completely independent company in China. And notably, this bill has bipartisan support and was already passed by the Senate. Now, in the context of all of this, the Chinese Communist Party is promising it will retaliate against the U.S. if it moves forward with some of these measures. Now, the Straits Times is reporting, quote, 2 sessions, referring to this top-level Chinese Communist Party meeting happening right now. China vows to retaliate if U.S. passes law allowing sanctions for coronavirus. Now, the U.S. is promising sanctions if the CCP enacts this law over Hong Kong. There are also several U.S. senators as well who wrote a public letter calling for sanctions against several top-level Chinese officials for their handling of this coronavirus. The Chinese Communist Party notably has also been making threats left and right, promising retaliation not just against the United States overall, but against Mike Pompeo and against several U.S. lawmakers. And in regards to that too, Mike Pompeo has come out and praised Taiwan's coronavirus response while also criticizing the Chinese Communist Party. And there are fewer things the Chinese Communist Party would find more offensive than this. And Mike Pompeo said this, quote, "The recent COVID-19 pandemic provided an opportunity for the international community to see why Taiwan's pandemic response model is worthy of emulation. And he continues, quote, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, the PRC's spiteful action to silence Taiwan exposes the emptiness of its claims to want transparency and international cooperation to fight the pandemic, and makes the difference between China and Taiwan ever more stark. And in response to many of the verbal attacks being launched by the Chinese regime against the United States right now, President Trump went out on Twitter and said, quote, some wacko in China just released a statement blaming everybody other than China for the virus, which has now killed hundreds of thousands of people. Please explain to this dope that it was the incompetence of China and nothing else that did this mass worldwide killing. And now, changing focus a bit, I thought it'd be helpful for everyone to get kind of a viewpoint, a high-level view of what is taking place in different parts of the world right now when it comes to this virus. And so I'm going to go over some of what's happening with the lockdowns specifically in the United States and in other parts of the world. And so first off, there's some contradictory things taking place in the U.S. We'll start off with Ohio. A judge has deemed the state's COVID-19 lockdown, quote, arbitrary, unreasonable, and oppressive, end quote. Ohio's COVID-19 lockdown is illegal, a state judge ruled today, because it exceeds the powers granted by the statute under which it was imposed. And somewhat contradicting that, in Michigan now, the court has ruled that Michigan Governor Whitmer can continue state of emergency without legislative approval. Click on Detroit reported, quote, the Michigan Court of Claims has ruled Governor Gretchen Whitmer has the authority to keep the state under a state of emergency without legislative approval. And it notes that Republican legislators sued Whitmer after she extended the state of emergency and stay-at-home orders without their approval. Now that said, whether other judges in other parts of the U.S. are going to hold that exact same viewpoint, we'll have to see. Let's move on to California now. The government there is talking about opening up the state, but when they do so, they're going to be putting in place a contact tracing system, similar to what they're talking about in New York. State health officials have launched an unprecedented effort to train thousands of frontline county-level workers to act as a firewall to stop the coronavirus from roaring back this fall. And in terms of how this will play out, it says, quote, when someone tests positive for COVID-19, the tracing team will interview that person, find out who they have been in close contact with, then quickly call each of those people to tell them they have been exposed to the virus and to instruct them to take a coronavirus test. If tests come out positive, individuals will be asked to stay home for 2 weeks. Then the whole cycle begins again. Now that said, when the current wave of outbreaks is over in the United States, President Trump said if there happens to be a second wave outbreak in the United States, he will not be locking down the country again.
Well, I think we're very close to opening up the rest. I think there's a lot of pressure put on certain governors that should be further along. They should be further along than they are, and they should not be doing what they're doing. So we'll see what happens, but the country is going to be in a very good place.
Now, moving on to some of the global issues and how this is playing out around the world. In Singapore, first off, police are deploying autonomous robots in a dormitory to patrol and to ensure social distancing. Now, notably in Sweden, they had taken very light stances on lockdowns, and there was talk that because they did that, they had herd immunity taking place. The virus there has gotten allegedly pretty bad now, but these antivirus tests are saying that the herd immunity may not have played out as they first believed. And so on this, Reuters says, quote, a Swedish study found that just 7.3% of Stockholmers developed COVID-19 antibodies by late April, which could fuel concern that a decision to not lock down Sweden against the pandemic may bring little herd immunity in the near future. Moving on to Mexico, the mayor of Mexico City says that they will begin gradual reopenings on June 1st, despite the ongoing outbreaks taking place there. Now, in Germany, they have large-scale protests against some of the government measures being taken there. The Guardian is reporting, quote, Germany braced for more protests against coronavirus policies, and this is how they're labeling the protesters, according to the Guardian. It says, quote, Minister urges people not to join rallies that include conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, and anti-Semites. Moving on to South Korea, the government there has made its first arrest of a foreigner for violating the quarantine. And now moving on to Peru, something somewhat lighter to end this on. In an effort to avoid detention, the mayor of a small town in Peru jumped into an open casket and pretended to be a coronavirus victim, The mayor, Jaime Rolando Urbini Torres, tried to play dead after being caught by police violating coronavirus lockdown rules while drinking with his friends in Tantara. Now, that said, folks, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, really need your support helping grow this channel. Also, we're going to be broadcasting the show Monday through Friday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, if you would like to join the premiere on YouTube. And again, folks, please take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.